The land was breathing dust that day, as if the desert itself had grown weary of holding its silence. The horizon blurred, swallowed by a copper haze, and the air grew thick with the restless moan of a storm building weight. There are storms in the west that come like a whisper, gentle as drifting smoke, and then there are storms that strike like punishment, sudden and merciless, filling the lungs with earth. This was the latter. Elias Boone felt it before he saw it. His bones, honed by years of tending cattle and mending fences, had learned the moods of the land. The morning sky had carried an edge, the wind sharp with a taste of grit. By noon, the world was nothing but shifting walls of sand, rattling like dry bones across the plain. He tightened the bandana around his neck and pulled the brim of his hat low, yet the dust still found the lines of his weathered face, carving deeper the marks of solitude that had already taken residence there. He was a man carved out of silence. 37 years had walked across his back like an unyielding trail, each year pressing him further from town, further from laughter, further from the tenderness of human touch. He had once known it, had once felt the warmth of a woman's hand pressed against his own, the sound of a child's laughter weaving through the wooden beams of a home he thought would last. Fever had taken them both within the span of a single winter, leaving only the echo of what he could not protect. Since then, his days were measured by the rise and fall of the sun over his cattle, his nights by the creak of an old chair beside the fire. He did not complain, for there was no one to hear him if he did. But sometimes, when the wind swept too loudly, he thought he heard voices in it, voices he forced himself to forget. Now, caught in the roar of the storm, Elias guided his horse against the shifting currents of sand. The beast's flanks trembled with each gust, nostrils flaring against the choking air. He whispered calm into its ear, words meant more to steady his own pulse than the animal's. The storm did not care. It clawed at him, tried to turn him from his path, tried to swallow him whole. Yet Elias pressed forward, for to stop moving was to become part of the earth that covered everything. And then, through the blur of grit and wind, he saw it. At first, it was nothing more than a quiver against the horizon, a darker smear in a world already painted in shades of rust. He thought it a trick of the eyes, the kind that comes when a man has stared too long into dust. But then it shifted again, not like the tumble of brush or the stagger of stone, but like something living, something trying to hold on. Elias narrowed his eyes. He tugged the reins and leaned forward, urging his horse into the heart of the storm. The closer he came, the more that shape took form. It was low to the ground, hunched, trembling beneath the whip of the wind. And then, through a tearing in the storm's veil, he saw the pale shape of an arm, clutching a bundle against its chest. A woman! The realization struck him with the weight of a hammer. Out here in the merciless mouth of a dust storm lay a woman, and by the faint cry carried through the roar, not a woman alone. Elias's breath caught. He dismounted, boots sinking into the shifting dirt, and pushed forward. Each step was a battle. The storm clawed at his coat, tried to rip his hat free, tried to shove him back into the nothingness. He bent low, pressing through until he reached her. She was crumpled in the dust, her hair tangled, her face gray with exhaustion and grit. Her arms curled fiercely around the bundle she carried, a strip of cloth barely shielding the tiny body within. The child's cry was faint, muffled by the storm, but it was there, a fragile thread of life resisting the desert's hunger. Elias dropped to his knees. His voice, rough from disuse, came low. "Hold on." The woman's eyelids fluttered, cracked lips parting as if to speak, but only a dry rasp came forth. Her body trembled violently, every ounce of her strength poured into shielding the infant in her arms. She was no older than 23 by his reckoning, though hardship had etched lines where youth should have rested. He reached carefully, peeling back the cloth just enough to see the child. A boy, newborn by the look of him, skin flushed red, fists clenched against the storm's intrusion. The boy wailed again, weak but determined. Something in Elias's chest twisted, something that had long been locked away. The storm screamed around them. Elias knew there was no time to waste. He slid one arm beneath the woman, the other beneath her child, and lifted them both. She was feather-light, fragile as brittle reed, yet heavy with the weight of what she carried. He rose, bracing himself against the wind, and staggered back toward his horse. The horse reared, spooked by the howl of Grit, but Elias's voice steadied it. He mounted with effort, clutching the woman and her child tight against his chest. With a sharp kick, he turned the beast toward the faint memory of home, trusting instinct to guide him where sight could not. The storm closed around them, erasing path and direction. Hours, or maybe minutes, bled together. He bent his body over theirs, shielding them with the breadth of his frame. Each breath burned his lungs, each heartbeat thundered with the fear that they would not make it. The woman's head sagged against him, her breath shallow, the child's cry faltering. A memory rose unbidden. His own child's cough, the sound of fever stealing breath. His grip tightened. Not again. Not this time. The horse stumbled but pressed on. Elias urged it with every ounce of will left in him. At last, through the choking veil, he saw it, the shadowed outline of his cabin, stubborn against the storm. Relief nearly buckled his knees, but he held fast. They reached the gate, the boards creaking beneath the storm's assault. Elias dismounted swiftly, carrying mother and child inside. The door slammed shut behind him, muting the roar to a dull thunder. Inside, the cabin was dim, the fire low but alive. Elias laid the woman gently upon the bed, the child still pressed in her arms. She stirred faintly, eyes blinking open. For the first time, her gaze found his. There was no trust in it, not yet. Only the raw instinct of a wounded creature, uncertain if the hand that reached for her would save or strike. Elias held her gaze steadily, his voice quiet, unthreatening. "You're safe now." Her lips parted. A whisper scraped past them, barely audible. "My boy." Elias bent, checking the child again. The boy's chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. He swaddled him tighter, laying him beside his mother. The woman's trembling hand reached out, brushing her son's cheek. Only then did she allow her eyes to close, exhaustion dragging her into darkness. Elias straightened, his chest heaving. Dust still clung to him, coated every surface of the room, yet inside him something stirred clean. He had gone into the storm alone, as he always did, but this time he had come back carrying life. He moved to the fire, feeding it with fresh logs, the glow spreading warmth into the cabin's corners. Then he sat in the old wooden chair, eyes fixed upon the fragile forms on his bed. The storm howled outside, furious at its loss. But inside, in that small cabin on the edge of the prairie, there was something stronger than the storm. Something that had been gone from Elias Boone's life for too long. The sound of a newborn's faint breathing. The presence of another soul. The fragile spark of hope. And in that moment, Elias knew the storm had not been a curse at all. It had been a messenger, delivering shadows into his path so that he might choose whether to turn away, or carry them into light. He had chosen. And nothing would be the same again.